Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Meet the Innovator sessions. I'm Rosemary Gallagher. I'm the Business Creation Manager at EIT Health UK Ireland. I'm joined here today by one of my dear teams, Dom from Xploro. Before we jump into the conversation, just a little bit of housekeeping. There's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen that you can use to ask questions. Dom and I are going to have a chat. Please feel free to interrupt it with your questions. And in fact, please feel free to completely derail our conversation with lots of great questions. The sessions are being recorded and Dom and I are having the same conversation 3 times. So we're very dependent on you to help us keep it interesting. And they will release the best recording. So if you ask the best questions, you get to be the one that is famous. We also have a chat function. You can use that to ask for tech support if you need it, or for general chit chat. And if you want to let us know where you're joining us from today, please use the chat to say hi, and we'll wave back. So on that note, I'm happy to introduce our speaker, our innovator today. This is Dom Raban from Xploro. Say hi, Dom.
Hi.
Hello. Tell us about you, Dom.
So my background is I've spent the last 30-something years as the owner and manager of creative and digital agencies. And for the last 13 years, I've owned and managed a digital agency that specializes in emerging technologies in the mobile space.
Okay. And then where did the idea from Xploro come about for Xploro?
So Xploro's very much the result of personal experience. So back in 2011, my daughter, who was 13 at the time, was diagnosed with Ewing's sarcoma, and she's now 8 years cancer-free, doing really well. But she went through a horrendous year of treatment, as you can imagine. She was treated at 6 different hospitals, included 10 weeks of proton beam therapy in the United States. Fortunately, she came out of the other side of that with a great prognosis. But I realised when she came out and I started reflecting on that year, I realised that there was something missing, and what was missing was information. No information about who she would meet, no information about the environment she was going into, and no information about the treatments that were going to be given to her.
Wow. Okay. So after you identified that problem, how did you go about fixing it?
So the first thing I did was think about the power of information as a bona fide therapy, and I started doing lots of research and discovered that there's loads of research that says, and it's common sense, and I'm sure everyone knows it, but there's loads of research that says that if you provide patients with information prior to an intervention, they experience reduced stress, reduced anxiety, and that can lead to better clinical outcomes. So that was the kind of aim, was to develop an intervention that would reduce anxiety for patients going into hospital. And actually, I should say that we did a research study last year, or our research partners did a research study last year, which actually proved that Xploro does that. So we used Xploro with a group of 80 children, 40 with access to standard healthcare information and 40 with access to Xploro. And what the research team found was that those children with access to Xploro demonstrated a statistically significant reduction in procedural anxiety, as well as statistically significant increases in both patient satisfaction and knowledge about procedures. And what was interesting was that their parents also demonstrated those same results.
That's incredible.
And just if anyone's interested, I'm sure we can share the link afterwards, but that paper is published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm a patient or the parent of a patient. What happens? How do I interact with this? How do I get it? What does it look like when I get it?
Yeah. Okay, so there's 3 components to Xploro. There's a management portal which clinicians have access to. There's a parent app which parents have access to, and then there's the patient app. And I'll talk about the patient app because that's the most interesting area. So what a child does when they interact with the app, the first thing they do is they create and customize an avatar, and that avatar then becomes their guide through their healthcare journey. And the avatar introduces them to avatars of all of the healthcare professionals that they're likely to meet when they come into hospital. And the child can customize each of those avatars so that they resemble their own medical team. They then introduce the child to various treatments. So we've got things like 3D or augmented reality models of MRI scanners. And so, you know, you can familiarize yourself with a whole range of complex treatments like having an MRI. There's also a range of environments. So what does an operating theatre look like? What does an anesthesia room look like? And these environments are 3D augmented reality models too. So you can see them on your table. You can have a play around. They're a bit like The Sims in many ways. And then we have a series of games, and each game has some medical learning attached. For instance, we have a game called Plasma Patrol, which is all about how leukemia is treated. And some of these games, crucially, some of these games are multiplayer. So you can play with either with other patients in the hospital or with your friends back home. And that's a really, really good way of helping to maintain links with friends that you're separated from, and also create new bonds with other patients. And then there's a calendar function which gives the child control of their day. They have a sense of what's going to happen during the day, and they can record how they feel about all of those events using an emoji set. And that information of that kind of mood diary information is played back to clinicians via our management portal so that they can monitor mood change over time. Okay. And crucially, the avatar is also an artificially intelligent conversational agent or chatbot, so it can answer any questions that the child might have.
What kind of questions do they ask?
Well, so all sorts of things, from the really mundane, like what's the Wi-Fi code, through to you know, in all seriousness, questions that that children with cancer often ask, questions like, am I going to die? And our chatbot is capable of identifying those very, very sensitive questions and then refers the child. I mean, the worst thing a chatbot can do is try and answer a question like that. So, so what we do is we refer the child to a healthcare professional when those kinds of questions come up. But generally, the majority of questions are kind of, you know, what's a physiotherapist do, or what is an MRI, or why do I need chemotherapy? Those kind of things.
So I can probably spell MRI, but what happens if I can't spell physiotherapist?
Well, you've got two options. One, you can just speak it, so you don't have to type it in. Okay. But if you type physiotherapist, FIZZYOPPISSED, like our chatbot will recognise that, because we use synthetic phonics or to recognise phonetic spelling. So what we do is we break down that text input into phonemes, and then we match that to a database.
Incredible. Okay, I have a lot of questions about your customers and your users, but I want to remind our audience that if you have better questions than I do, please ask them. Please interrupt the flow of our conversation and take us down a different path. You can use the Q&A function, and I'll relay all of your questions to Dom. So Dom, tell us about your customers and your patients and what matters to them.
Okay, so our customers are healthcare organisations, primarily, whether they be hospitals or whether they be health insurers, or in some cases pharma companies. What matters to the healthcare organisations generally is that they want to see a health economics benefit. So they want to know that Xploro is ultimately going to help them save money. And there are ways in which Xploro does that. So for example, by familiarizing children with complex procedures like MRI, we can reduce the number of repeat procedures. We know that in 20% of cases, not just in pediatrics, but in all patients, in 20% of cases, patients move for the first time they have an MRI because they're not prepared for it. But if you see, you know, an interactive model of the procedure, if you understand what the pathway is going to be, you're less likely to move. So we can reduce the number of times they move and save money there. We can encourage adherence through our calendar system. We enable remote patient monitoring through our PROMS system. So all of these things have health economics benefits to healthcare organisations. The benefit to the patient, on the other hand, is obviously not about how much money you can save. It's about reducing anxiety. It's about making that whole experience feel less daunting and less scary. And feeling comfortable with the experience. And I had an email from a parent a little while ago, which I think sums up the value to patients. And the email, I'm just going to read it because it's for me, this is what Xploro is all about. So this is from a mum who had or has a 9-year-old daughter. The daughter has a benign brain tumour, and she was due to go into hospital to have the tumour removed. She was terrified, the mum was terrified, and then they got access to Xploro, and the mum said, just wanted to say my daughter is loving the app. She said she feels that it's making the process less scary for her, and she's loved showing it off to family members. We've noticed in the few days since using it, she has been openly talking about going into hospital, which before this she wouldn't do. And for me, that's so important, because what she's done is she's moved from internalizing all her fears to sharing her thoughts about the upcoming experience. And she now isn't just a patient who's about to have a procedure performed on her. She's got agency in that process. And for me, that email, you know, kind of beautifully sums up what we're trying to do with Xploro.
I was struck as well by what you said earlier on about helping other kids interact with it, because it's such an alienating experience to watch a friend go through something like that. How do you kind of identify with another kid who isn't going to school every day and who's having this really different experience? So the fact that the kid was talking about it and telling people about it and kind of almost excited about it.
Yeah. In fact, actually, Rosemary, you've just sort of touched on the edge of a really important new feature which we're hoping to develop in 2021, which is content for siblings. So we know that the siblings of children going through treatment for serious illnesses are a grossly underserved group, and they have very well-defined psychosocial needs and problems. So what we're doing in 2021 is creating essentially a companions app that allows the sibling to understand what their brother or sister is going through.
That's fantastic. Okay. We know that I know that you have an exceedingly unique board of advisors. Can you tell our audience about that board of advisors?
Yeah, so our board of advisors, our expert advisory board, as we call them, I mean, they really steer the direction of Xploro. They're always on hand to give us advice about what's working, what isn't working, and ideas for new features. Now, the oldest advisor on the board is 15. The youngest is 8. And they're a fantastic group. They about half of them have been to hospital for treatment for serious illnesses. So they, if you like, they're the hospital experts on the group. The other half have never been into hospital for anything. So they represent a typical first-time Xploro user. And they're just brilliant. And what's so good about them is that they are incredibly honest. So they don't hold back when it comes to criticizing what we've done. They come up with really brilliant ideas for new features. So, I talked about the mood diary earlier, and the way the mood diary works is that the patient chooses an emoji that represents their mood. So our expert advisory board designed the emoji set and also helped us identify the 16 most common words that they use to describe a whole range of emotions.
Give me
So
examples.
that whole, give you an example. Well, so they're a common set of words, but the way we did it was we presented the expert advisory board with a whole range of scenarios. So I don't know, your best friend's just stolen your new pair of shoes. How do you feel? And then they would write a word down, like that. So they write a word down, and we kind of brought all that together and found the 16 most common words they use. So one word that came out of that, which we wouldn't have naturally chosen, was cranky.
Cranky.
Cranky,
Like
yeah.
that.
So I don't know if there's any
That's a very powerful word, because we know about anger and all of the feelings of anger, but sometimes it's too strong a word.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes you're just a bit cranky.
Yeah. I'm irritable about this cancer treatment that I'm going through.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so separate to this board of advisors, and actually I'm a little bit curious as to where you found these kids. But separate to the board of advisors, how do you engage with and hear feedback from your customers and your users, and how do you kind of figure out what matters to them? You've wowed me in this session and in the previous session about all of these new features. How do you prioritize them? How do you decide what matters?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, I guess this goes back to my background, which is in human-centered design and involving users in the design process. So we've involved patients, parents, and clinicians at every stage of the process, right from very early on in the sort of ideation stage through to testing features as they come about. So every feature comes about as a result of an identified user need. And we capture those user needs in various ways through interviews. We observe users in controlled environments. So we spend time going into usability labs and watching users use the products through a one-way mirror. We have our expert advisory board, of course, who are always on hand. And then it's as important that we meet the needs of clinicians in some ways as it is that we meet the needs of patients. So we have a clinician on our board, and we work very, very, very closely with a couple of hospitals here in the UK.
I'm going to interrupt now because we just had a really good question. And I think it's worth sort of telling everybody at this point in time that the way Dom and I met was that Dom was one of our Head Start winners in 2019. And that prompted a really fruitful interaction with one of our Spanish partner hospitals. So Pedro asked, could you repeat if Xploro is a solution from or for hospitals? And secondly, what are the benefits for clinicians? The patient and Xploro's feedbacks are for the clinicians, hospital manager, or both.
Okay, right. So the first thing is that Xploro is for hospitals rather than from hospitals, and it's designed in such a way that it can be, it's not unique to any one hospital, so it can be applied to any hospital or healthcare setting. In terms of the benefits for clinicians, there are multiple benefits, but the key ones are remote patient monitoring through the capture of patient-reported outcomes, reduction in repeat procedures through familiarization, increased adherence through our calendar system, reduction in did not attends also through notifications through our calendar system. And overall, our main goal is reduction in anxiety, as borne out by the research study I mentioned earlier.
It must be, as well, from a clinician's perspective, just really reassuring to talk to a patient that has some concept of what they're going into, as opposed to having to break that news afresh to every kid that's coming through your clinic.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I hope if there are any clinicians in the audience, they're not going to massively disagree with what I'm about to say. But clinicians aren't
Use the
always the
chat if you
best.
do.
Clinicians aren't always the best people at telling patients what's going to happen to them. You know, that very much felt that when my daughter was going through treatment, but I've also spoken to lots of clinicians who've had a bit of a light bulb moment when they found themselves being a patient and they've gone into a hospital and realized that actually everything is focused on getting their treatment right and not about preparing them for their treatment.
Yeah, I had a just flashbulb memory of watching a parent go through treatment when I was a child. And they had some sort of a mismatch in how old they thought I was because they told me very shocking medical information without really any of the preparation that you would expect to accompany that kind of information. As a clinician here, I find the project brilliant, Dom. Thank you for introducing us to it. Thank you so much, Dimitra. That's lovely. That's lovely. We have, I think, just a few more minutes remaining. So please do ask your questions if you have them. I'm going to kind of jump in a little bit to the business aspect of it. Do you think that this very patient-first approach has improved your business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can confidently say that we have a product that meets the needs of users, and I can say that because users have helped us design it. So, yeah, absolutely.
And do you find that a lot of people, like, how do people hear about Xploro? I mean, aside from the fact that everyone is going to be tweeting about it after this session. Is it like word of mouth, or do the hospitals tell them?
You mean how does a family hear about it? Yes. Yeah. So typically, what will happen is that when a family receives their first consultant appointment, there will be something with that letter or email that directs them to the parent application, which is a web-based application. The parent then creates an account. They're taken through some reassurances about how their child's data is going to be used, and some reassurances about how all of the content within Xploro is clinically validated. And then once the parent is happy with that, they generate a unique 3-word code, which they can communicate to their child. And then at that point, the child can access the Xploro patient app.
Okay. We just have a question here from Jose. How can it be implemented in any hospital? What are the challenges?
It's a great question. I mean, the biggest challenge is the procurement route. How does the hospital pay for it? Unfortunately, certainly in the UK, you have to demonstrate a year-on-year cost saving. You can't demonstrate a long-term cost saving. So procurement is always a challenge. In terms of once you've got through the procurement route, how easily can it be implemented in hospital? Incredibly easily. So Xploro is designed to match any hospital anywhere. What we do find is that some hospitals will customize Xploro. So we're working with the Christie here in the UK. They wanted some custom environments, so we built those for them. But Xploro is ready to go out of the box. So so long as we can get over the procurement challenge, then it's easy to deploy.
We are out of time. The session is in an end. And thank you very much for your questions. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Dom, for that wonderful, wonderful explainer. We're going to do this all again in 5 minutes. So if you enjoyed the session, please tell a friend to join us, and have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.